Okay, we're going to start the Ramchal again this week. The Sefer, page 30. The subject matter is Bebori Yisborach Shmo, the Creator Himself. Who exactly is the Creator? Why is it fundamental, important to believe that there is a Creator, and how this encompasses, and this is the bedrock of Jewish belief. Called Ish Yisrael Tzorach Sheyamin V'Yeda. Every Jew must believe and know Sheisham Motzui Rishon, that there is a first being, meaning God was always. Where did it all begin? There's a being that has always been. Kadmon v'nitzchi. He was always v'nitzchi. He's eternal. V'ushehimtzi u'mamtzi kol ma shenimtza b'metzius. Himtzi, he brought everything about. Umamtzi, and he maintains. All that exists in existence, as God initially had brought things about by willing existence, he continues to will that same existence. Vueloka, and that's God Himself. So, in the name of the Ramchal, he writes elsewhere, at the beginning of creation, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu finished creating the world, it says, God did everything lasos. He's saying in Vayichulu, it says lasos. What is the lasos to do? So he explains over there, if Adam wouldn't have eaten of the Eitz Hadas, wouldn't have eaten the tree of knowledge, he would have never been driven out of the Garden of Eden. The world would have reached a level of perfection. Beyond that point, there would have never been suffering in the world. The world would have taken on a level of physical, spiritual. It would have functioned in a spiritual capacity. There would have never been an Avram Avinu. There would have never been a great flood. There would have never been an Egypt. There would have never been a Sinai. And the Torah itself, how would have it manifested itself? Not as we have it today. It wouldn't have been a physical world. The laws of damages, the laws of punishment, the laws of Sanhedrin, the court, witnesses, various torts, contracts, has no relevance. So how did all that manifest itself? For instance, when God gave us the Torah at Sinai, the angels in heaven said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ma'enish kisis karenu, they wanted the Torah themselves. Now, Moshe didn't say, do you have an arm, do you have relevance to wearing tefillin? Didn't say that. Or, do you have relevance to eating non-kosher? There were other things. He responded why they have no relevance to it. But what was even the consideration that the angel should have relevance to Torah? Torah is Torah mitzvahs. So the manifestation of Torah as we have it today has no relevance to the angels. The answer is, the Ramchal writes, that these are only manifestations of the spiritual manifesting itself in the physical. Meaning whatever has to be addressed in the spiritual to bring about perfection and completion in the spiritual realm, it's by observing Tayrag mitzvos. 248 positive mitzvahs, 365 negative commandments, whatever it may be. But that's only based on the manifestation of the world, because Adam ate of the Eitz Hadas, he ate of the tree of knowledge. The world was failed and wasn't worthy of perfection, of having the relationship with God. The world had to be brought to a level of perfection. How does it brought to the level of perfection, B'Yisrael Yisrael Shenik Reishus, through Klal Yisrael, through the Torah as it was received by us at Sinai. We had to say Nasa v'Nishma. The nations of the world had rejected it. So, but initially, if he wouldn't have sinned, things wouldn't have manifested themselves and evolved as they did evolve. So when it says God caused things to come about initially because He willed them, umamtzi, and He continues to sustain them. How does He sustain it? Based on what? Based on our behavior. We read in Torah, if you follow my statutes, bounty, blessing is beyond. And if you don't, then the world takes on another direction. The world regresses, the world suffers, the world is denied, the world is deprived. What happens? But if there's one continuous willing, and it's on the same level, how do things change? If seasons are set, every season should be identical, all happenings should be identical, but they're not identical. You have peaks, you have valleys, you have different situations, things which are totally out of the ordinary. Everything is based on, as which is one of the tenets of Jewish belief, is charvonish, reward and punishment, in this world, or situations, challenges, trials and tribulations. What is that all based upon? Everything is to bring about the ultimate level of what? Of perfection of existence. How God wills and maintains existence is all based on this principle of the balance of good and evil, and ultimately how we will ultimately achieve shleimus. But if perfection would have been achieved immediately, then it would have been on an ongoing basis at the same level, or even continuously willing it at a more advanced level. So Vushehimtzi, He's the one who brought it into being. Umamtzi, He maintains, He wills it continuously. Komashenimtza b'metzi is all that's found in existence. And who is this being who's always existed, who's infinite, who's always been? Halokah Baruch Hu, that's God Himself. We say every day in the Birchas Kriya Shema, God renews through His goodness Masa Bereshis, the act of creation. So when we say the world is so many thousands of years old, that doesn't mean factually it's been willed that many years. But factually every moment is a new moment of existence. Because God continues, as He willed existence initially to come into being, what we call yesh mi'ayin, that we call ex nihilo, every moment is an ex nihilo regarding the previous moment. Because if He should cease willing at any moment, what would exist? Not destruction. What would exist would be pre-existence, which is less than vacuum. Because vacuum, or unformed existence, chaotic existence, that's part of what He willed. That's the process to bring it to a level of structure and form. That's the first thing you have to believe. That there's a Motzi Rishon, that there's a being that has always been, and He's eternal, He's infinite. He willed existence to come about, and He continues to will that existence as He chooses to will it. The various appellations for Hashem is Yud Kei Vav Kei, Hoyo Hovaviyah. He was, He is, He's in the future. Elokim. What is Elokim? Elokim is translated as Almighty, and literally means all. Bal Kochas Kulam. Everything is included in His being. There's nothing beyond His ability. We can't even fathom. We only know His ability in terms of what He's done. And even that, we're not fully aware of what He does. There's a Maral, the Maral of Prague, in his introduction to Gevruras Hashem. He goes to explain the Pasuk, the words of David, Mi Yimal Gevruras Hashem, Yashmiya Koti Loso. Who can utter the power of God to make known all his praise? So he goes to explain that to be able to have an understanding of God, you have to see the full gamut. One doesn't see the full gamut. As the Ramchal writes in Das Tfunos, even after V'hoya Hashem l'melech ha'kol, God will reveal himself at the end of time, when the world will reach its level of perfection. Our understanding of God will be, he says, pochs mitipish habiyam, will be less than a droplet in the ocean. God is infinite. Whatever we're going to be, whatever is revealed to us, but what's our capacity? We're finite beings. So how could the finite comprehend, fathom the infinite? It's an impossibility. So whatever degree we will fathom, it's a tip shabiyam. Mi yamalak Gevruras Hashem. Could one utter the power of God? We don't even see the power. And even if we see it, we only see it on a very superficial level. Let's say you see the full gamut. There's so many layers below that. Do you understand the significance? So therefore you can't even say all its praise, because you don't understand what that is. There's a similar, we always say that at Kriyas Yamsuf, Klal Yisrael said, Zeh Kelev Aveu. So Rashi cites the Midrash, Heru Be'etzba. It's like they point with their finger. God was so palpable that they were able to point. Zeh Kelev, this is my God, I will exalt him, extol him. So on that verse, Chazal say, what the maidservant saw at the sea, Yecheskel HaNovi, Yecheskel the prophet did not see. When the maidservant saw what she saw, did she understand what she was seeing? So she saw, but in terms of what was at a level of superficiality, she didn't have the capacity to comprehend to any degree what that was. Mm-hmm. It's majesty. It's God's majesty. But what is it? Without any degree of spiritualization, prior spiritualization, she couldn't process it. With all the preparation that we have and we will have, regardless, it's the same thing. We're no more than the Shifal Yam regarding, relative to the reality of who God is. He's Motzi Rishon Kadmon V'Nitzchi. He's always been here, and he is infinite. That's the first thing we have to understand. The whole idea of the Esemakos in Egypt, what did Paro believe? When Moshe originally presented his credentials to Paro, who was a pagan, he said to Moshe, Mi Hashem Asher Eshem Mekolo. Who is this God? He's not listed in the encyclopedia of deities. Lahavdil. Because what was their understanding? A deity is a power, it's a limited power. There's no such thing as an infinite being. It doesn't exist. As existence is finite, the power behind existence is finite and limited. And if you have multi-deities, that means each deity is what? Is finite. Because one doesn't overlap with the other. So God, Lahavdil, is also a deity. Who said he is more than we have? Who said he's more powerful than what we have? To say he's the all-encompassing, there's no such thing. Doesn't exist. And everything else is a manifestation that he willed all these powers. Continuously wills their existence, their function. So what did the Esemakos accomplish? That if all of them addressed that every aspect of existence and every power is controlled by this one power. That means he is the Almighty. We always mention, there's a Siforno in Parshas portion of Parshas, Elokim is Bal Kochas Kulam. He's the Almighty. An angel is called Kale. That's singular. Micha mocha ba'elim Hashem. Among all the elim, among all the angels, is anybody compared to you? The angel is limited in the capacity that he's created to function in that capacity. He is a power. But to what degree is it power? As God wills it. So Elokim is the plural of Kael. He is the multiple of all the powers. That's Elokim. This is Varno. That's Baal Kochas Kulam. He is the Almighty. The angel is mighty only to the degree that God allows him to be mighty. So that's singular versus plural. So it's the first thing we have to understand. Otzar Sheyeda. Something else you have to know. This is fact. Indisputable fact. That this being that exists in amitas mitziyusu musegas uloso klal, the truthfulness of his essence is only known to himself, not to anyone else, as we just explained. It's impossible to know who he is because he himself is infinite. Rak zenodebo. So how do we know he's infinite? I mean, the person doesn't understand something. I'll give you an example. Once discussed this, when they first sent up the Hubble telescope to take the first pictures. So the first picture that came back was 1,000,000 miles of space dust. It's not fathomable. So it's like forever, but that's finite. So if you cannot fathom 1,000,000 miles of space dust, and the just keeps going beyond that, so maybe chas v'sholem, because we're not able to grasp them, does that mean it's infinite? Maybe it's not infinite. Something that's beyond your capacity. That doesn't cause that it should be classified as infinite. So how do we know God's infinite? Because we're not able to fathom him. There are many things we can't fathom. Could you fathom how many granules of sand are in existence? You can't. How many insects are there? How many leaves are on all the trees in existence? How many ounces of water exist in the world? It's not possible. So how do we know God is infinite? And God was always. So the only one who knows the truthfulness of his essence is himself. The found entity of God is complete in every conceivable aspect of what perfection is. You know, we speak about relative to absolute. Something. He's the most perfect person. He's perfect. There's nothing perfect. Relative to anything else, it's perfect. But perfect in the absolute sense, the only one's perfect in the absolute sense is God himself. See, he's sholem betachlis hashlemus, b'chol minei shlemus. Whatever perfection is, that's what he is. V'lo nimtza bo chesaron klal. There are no deficiencies in him. It's a question, but how do we know this? There are many things. How do we know? We only know certain things through Kabbalah, through tradition. At Sinai, it was communicated. They had a level of clarity. As Tosas cites the Medrash, when the Jews stood at Sinai, God opened the heavens and opened the depths of earth and showed them that nothing exists in existence except him. And from then they understood that he's the creator. And this was communicated through prophecy. This was face to face. It was the wake state they prophesied at Sinai. What they saw at Sinai, they passed it on to the children, and the children to their children. This is what we call Mesorah. That's the transmission from Sinai. All this that we're speaking, that God is infinite and God wills and continues to will. We have this in tradition from the Avos, Umin Nevi'im, from the patriarchs and from the prophets. V'yisigum kol Yisrael b'mayim har Sinai. And all Jews who stood at Sinai were able to comprehend this. V'omdu al mitosa b'biru. And they were able to establish, to verify this on an absolute level. There were no questions. First of all, it's a subject matter. So even though you're proficient, but are you the expert? Even if you're the expert, it can mean that you don't have full grasp of the material, but nobody has the grasp that you have. At Sinai, omdu al amitosam bibiru. They were able to come upon the truthfulness without question of every of these realities. And when they came upon these truths, these absolute truths, they taught to their children, dor achador, one generation after another. Kiyom hazeh, until today. So if you ask any Jew, why do you believe in God? It's part of my Masorah. But how do you know? Could you figure it out yourself? Impossible. If you start from this moment going forward, you look at the world, it seems to be, there could be multiple powers. And this is what paganism is. Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Shalom Gevruras. And why did we transmit it from generation after generation, those truths? Because that was the Torah obligation. Gevruras. It was a divine dictate. Moshe Rabbeinu communicated to us that it's the will of Hashem, Gevruras, that what happened at Sinai, all the truths, those absolutes they came upon, through the communication, it has to be transmitted generation after generation, father to son. And seemingly, if that's the obligation, because there's no other way to know it. It's something you can't figure out yourself. You'd say, how's it possible? You'd be skeptical. You become a skeptic. Is it possible that there's something which is infinite? The world is finite. How can... It's true. The only way you could come upon this is only because it was revealed to you by God Himself. It's like a person says, if I wouldn't have seen it myself, I wouldn't have believed it. Lahavdil. It's only because Hashem revealed Himself through a level of revelation, which there was never such a revelation in existence, ever. What He communicated to the Navi on a personal level, He communicated to Klal Yisrael on a national level. Every Jew. And what was the dictate at Sinai? To give it over to our children, generation after generation, as it says in the Pasuk, Pentishkach esedvar b'sharu einecho. Because you may forget the things that you saw with your own eyes. It means much more than with your own eyes. They only saw with those eyes because it was within a prophetic context. And what you saw, you must inform your children and your children's children. That's a Torah obligation. Masorah is a Torah obligation. Each parent has an obligation to communicate what was communicated to him till the end of time. Without that, there is no God. Humanly, it's impossible to even relate to this. So how do we know God is infinite? Because we experienced it firsthand. Through that revelation. There's such a thing known as optical illusions. There are many things, You have a mirage, you're in the desert, the person starts hallucinating, or different things, reflections due to the contour of the earth and the sun and the various reflections, right? So people say, yeah, maybe they hallucinated at Sinai. You can say what you want. But if you have 4 or 5 million people experiencing and internalizing the identical experience, and each one says and they could give you detailed information. What exactly was communicated, and how it was communicated, and what context it was communicated, and the breadth and depth of that communication. He's not a person who's having some kind of unrealistic journey that he's in the world unto himself. This is concrete fact. You know, there's a famous word from the Mesivs HaMishpat. Lawyers on the Torah level, credible evidence is testimony. Testimonies, you have to have two witnesses. A single witness is not believed. Let's say, to extract money from a person, to find a person guilty, to impose punishment, you have to have two witnesses. Why must you have two witnesses? So he explains it's really based on the Gemara. Of course, you have to corroborate the information. One person sees something, he may be seeing it from his own vantage point. But if you have a second person saying identically what the first, and you interrogate the witnesses, and the testimony is identical, so one corroborates the others. So if you have 5 million people, each one corroborating exactly to the detail what they experienced. Of course, there were different levels of that understanding. But at a baseline, they all experienced the same thing. So if you have 5 million people corroborating to the smallest detail that there is a creator who is infinite, who's always been, who wills continuously all existence, and nothing exists outside of him. You say these people are something, they're hallucinating. Impossible. You want to be a skeptic, you want to deny it, you can deny what you want to deny. Look, Korach also denied it. God openly spoke to Moshe. And yet Korach was able to think in his own mind, because of his own envy, that this was something Moshe contrived himself. But if God has him representing him, could he have contrived this himself? Could he have created himself? God says he's my trusted servant. His word is my word. But you never know. But you only think that way based on your own conflict of interest. It's a famous word from Rabbi Chana Wasserman, Zechat Tzaddik Livrocha. He writes he has a work. He writes over there, he has a question. The Rambam, when he speaks about Aristotle, he says he was able, through his genius, to come upon understanding that a prophet was only able to come upon only through a communication. That's what level of genius Aristotle was. It's called Kovetz Maimorim. It's a compilation of various essays which he had written, Rabbi Chana Wasserman, Zechat Tzaddik Livrocha, Hashem Yiknokim His Domo, and he asks a question. A 12-year-old girl, a 13-year-old boy, has an obligation to believe in God. Aristotle, the genius of geniuses, where the Rambam sings his praises in terms of what level of genius he was, didn't believe in God. So how could God put such a heavy, weighty burden on a 12, 13-year-old child to believe in God, where Aristotle, the genius of geniuses, the intellectual of intellectuals, didn't believe in God? Very fundamental question. It's like somebody says, if the majority of the world doesn't believe in what the Jews believe in, evidently we're the minority, they must be right. You know, there's majority rule. And you realize they understand, and you understand they're no fools. So what's the answer? So he explains, Rebbe Chanan, that if a person has a conflict of interest, what's the greatest conflict of interest the person has? His own desires. What happens if believing in God somehow interferes with your desires, with your ambitions, with your aspirations? God doesn't exist. And you will justify it and prove it in the most genius way. So Aristotle, being the genius of geniuses, but what was he? He was an earthy person. He had desires. He was a physical person. He was not a spiritual person. He was endowed with a genius beyond. So through his genius, if he would have recognized that there is a creator, and there is divine retribution, and you cannot behave the way you choose to behave, but it's only way God wants you to behave, that means you can't do your own thing. So as a result of these conflicts of desire, he will prove to the nth degree, where you can't even refute him, that there is no God. A 12-year-old girl, 13-year-old boy, they're pure, they're just beginning their life. They don't have those conflicts of interest. My father said at Sinai, his grandfather, they accepted face value. Later in life, I think you may, in retrospect, say, maybe I was too gullible when I was 12, 13 years old. Okay, but that's the challenge. That's the challenge, right? Do you succumb to that later when you have the conflicts, or you strengthen the belief initially, and you shore it up through the performance of mitzvahs and study of Torah, that these issues are no issues in the future. But if you don't, you become an enlightened person. What was the whole idea of the Enlightenment movement? 12, 13, what did I understand? I was a child. I went to university and became enlightened. And I hear other positions who reject this. No, evidently, I was too immature to really understand the reality of life. People do this. And they abandon ship. Down the road, they abandon ship. What happens when you abandon ship? You know what happens? You drown. That's what you do when you abandon ship. And that's the whole world is drowning. I once mentioned, Chazal, most people, they misunderstand this. Who was the first person who found God? Came upon God? Avram Avinu. Did Avram find God, or did God find him? We discussed this. Avram entered into a theological dialogue with the greatest thinkers of his generation. He wasn't satisfied with what they had said. As I said, that answers, but he wasn't looking for an answer. That he wanted to know the answer. Very often, a person asks questions. He says, I could live with that answer. Avram wasn't interested in living with an answer. He wanted to know the answer. Now, if you ask a question, you can't find the answer. The question becomes the answer. Therefore, it must be. Maybe there are multiple other answers that you didn't come upon. So how do you know the answer is there is only one creator? Maybe there's another answer. A human being is finite. His mind has limitation. So just because you haven't come upon the answer, the question is not the answer. If it's not deity, it must be a monotheistic being. Why? Maybe there could be 10,000 other answers, which you haven't yet uncovered. Once met a person, used to engage with him in debate, professed atheist. And he says, I have questions, and I discussed with many rabbis, and they couldn't answer my questions. Therefore, my position is established. So I said, you mean because you don't have an answer, that gives credibility to your position? I said, maybe I have an answer. Maybe there are another 100 answers to your question. Because the people that you engage with, they weren't able to answer your question. That's not a confirmation on your position that there's no God. I said, let me hear the question. So if there are endless other possibilities, how did Avram come to the conclusion, therefore there must be a monotheistic being? So if you look in the Midrash, that's not what happened. Avram Avinu asked the question. And the expression of the Midrash is, Avram Ra Biro Dolekes. He saw a citadel which was illuminated. Could you imagine? You see a 10,000 room palace. Every room is furnished, every room is glowing and illuminated. It's functioning. And he says, he calls out, Mi Balabiro. Who is the master of this citadel? Gets no answer. And he keeps asking the question. Because he doesn't have the answer. Because whatever answer they answer, he rejects it. Until finally, HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself says, Ani Balabiro. Because Avram was not willing to compromise his quest for truth, therefore he merited to come upon truth. But what truth did he merit to come upon? Not that he found the truth. The truth found him. Ani Balabiro, because again, based on what we're saying, unless it's Masorah, unless God himself reveals himself and communicates through prophecy or through Sinai, that he is the infinite being, it's not credible. The analysis is not a valid analysis. It therefore must be. There's no therefore. The therefore is only if God himself says, I am. And that's what happened at Sinai. That's what happened with the Avos HaKadoshim. They were prophets. Hashem revealed himself and communicated this to them. That's how they knew it. So what happens if you don't have that communication and you have a brilliant mind? Either you say there is no God, I mean there's not even a deity, or you say the world functions based on the system of deities, which that's paganism. The Emor tells us in Avodah Zarah that there was a drought for many years. And a person had a dream that if he slaughters his son to a certain angel, it will rain sufficiently and the drought will be broken. And the person went, slaughtered his son, and sure enough, came in torrents. And the drought came to an end. So the Emor says, so how do we understand it? So the Emor first says that, in fact, it was meant to rain at that particular moment. It happened to be, so it's not because he slaughtered his son. So the Emor says, no. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to test us, as it says in the Pasuk, when you have a false prophet coming and he tells you to serve idols, and he performs a supernatural act. It's supernatural. It is. So it's not simple not to accept it. He'll take the sea, he'll split the sea for you. And he says, there's a deity who's behind me. He's a false prophet, he deserves to be put to death. But he split the sea. Hashem, God, allows these people to have a power to change nature to be tested. That's a test. So why did it rain? Because he slaughtered his son. Of course, God caused it to rain. But the act of serving the deity activated, caused God, but that's the test. You know how tough this is? Person is starving, suffering, and you go, chas v'shalom, person goes to one of these healers, and he says whatever he may say, and the person miraculously is able to walk, doesn't suffer, wealth, everything good in life. The person says you can't deny reality. Chas v'shalom. And what do you attribute it to? You attribute it to what? To the deity. Factually, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did it. But what was the method? But how would the person, how is he going to process that? That's it. That's his reality. You have to overcome this. This is Sifarno. The Torah tells us that when we came to Canaan and there were idols, you have to destroy the idols, gold, silver, whatever it's made of, and you can't have anything to do with it. And it's classified as what Isurei Ano. You're not even permitted to benefit from it. Why? So he goes to explain. The person says, of course I don't believe in it. But what happens after you get this gold and silver, and all of a sudden you have phenomenal success, and unusual things happen in your life? What are you going to attribute it to? This is not ordinary gold. This gold initially was an idol, and it's connected to some power. And that power, and you're drawn into it. And it's inevitable. It's like almost an easy fall. It's a slippery slope. You don't want to be involved. You know, in medicine years ago, today you don't hear it so much, because today they call it holistic. But at one time they called it quackery. Seriously, one time you never heard of holistic medicine. You know, a person was dying of cancer, apricot pits, extract of apricot pits. You had to go to Mexico for this. So people, it was quackery, right? What happens when a person becomes desperate? A person's willing to believe anything. You're grasping for straws. Remember, years ago there was a dermatologist in Baltimore. He was a good person, he was a Jew. His wife was wheelchair bound. This is already in the late 50s, 60s. And he serviced all the yeshiva boys free of charge. Fully dedicated. Selflessly. But he serviced the men of the cloth from the church the same way. No less. He was a Jew. And he was a prominent dermatologist. And he had pictured in his office his wife in a wheelchair in the Vatican with the Pope. It extends his ring and she kisses his ring. You understand? That's what he was doing. You're a Jew. What's a Jew doing in the Vatican? And his wife is kissing the ring of the Pope. Firstly, evidently, he didn't have any roots in Judaism. He was, at best, a Yom Kippur Jew, a Rosh Hashanah Jew, at best. But still, this is Christianity. What happens if a person, chas v'sholem, is in a desperate state? He grasps for straws. He's a holy man. He's a man of the cloth. He has some kind of connection to God. So, but that's avodah zarah. Literally, that's idolatry. Although it's not, the Mishnah says in avodah zarah, a person who's megafi from nashik as a pesel, you rub your sin, you embrace the idol, you kiss it. It's not punishable by death, because that's not the means of worship. But it's a Torah violation. It's a Torah violation. Kissing the ring of the Pope, it's Torah. It's idolatry. But again, unless you have the Mesorah, and Mesorah is not hearsay. Mesorah has to be, Divrei Torah Tzricha Chizuk. Torah has to be continuously strengthened. The Ramchal writes in the Mesillas Yesharim, Moritel states in a number of locations, Barosi Yetzara, Barosi Lo Torah Tavlin. The only antidote to the Yetzara is only Torah. What does that mean? There's no way to come upon a level of clarity that the dictates and the beliefs of the Torah are true. To internalize them, it's only through Torah. Any other way, you're always on a tilt. A human being is always on a tilt. It's like it says in Pirkei Avos, cites the pasuk that if a person is kodmo yirosel l'chochmoso, if one's wisdom is predicated on one's fear of God, the roots are deep. All the winds in the world cannot blow over that tree. But if you have shallow roots and that tree is weighty, the slightest wind could just topple that tree. So what gives the person deep roots? That's the Torah. That's the toppling. That's the only antidote. So you could have tradition, you could have whatever you want. As they say in the vernacular, push comes to shove, and whatever it may be. And you're suffering, you're deprived, and you're needy, whatever it may be. And all of a sudden, somebody presents another position, and that causes your predicament to change. Person says, look, seeing is believing. Proof's in the pudding, as they say. Chas v'sholem. If that's it, it's the beginning of the end. Beginning of the end. So there's a mitzvah, and it's a divine dictate. Shekein tziva Moshe Rabbeinu l'v'shol mipi Gevura. Moshe Rabbeinu was only speaking in the name of God. Petishkach hasadvar b'shiroi necho. You may forget what you saw with your own eyes. And therefore, vodatem levanecho levanecho. You must inform what you experienced and what you came upon the truths of Sinai, which only Sinai could have brought you to that truth. See, people, they say, what's the difference between Lahavdil, Judaism, and any other religion? Christianity. There were a number of apostles. They witnessed certain miracles. So they said it. Could you believe it? Maybe not. Maybe yes. But here, every Jew in existence witnessed, heard the Dvar Hashem at Sinai. Right? You heard the Dvar Hashem. So they equated, what is it analogous to? There was a Hasidic rabbi who passed away. He left a dynasty, tens and tens of thousands of followers, Hasidim. And he left two sons, and he didn't leave in his will which son should be his successor. And the Hasidim, they were bickering and arguing who should be the successor. They couldn't come to a conclusion. One son was bright, brilliant. He had an idea. How is he going to become the successor? Next day, he calls an emergency meeting, calls all the leaders of this particular sect of Hasidim, and he says, I'm supposed to be the new leader. I'm my father's said. He said, why? He says, because I had a dream. My father came to me in a dream and said that I should be his successor. He said, all the Chassidim got very excited. Hail to the chief, the new Hasidic rabbi. What happens? There was a wise chassid there, and he says, I hear what you're saying, but let me ask you a question. If your father wanted you should be a success, who do you think he should have come to? To you or to us? He should have told us. You could tell us whatever you want. These 10, 15, 20, 100 people, they said, therefore what? If this power said that he's God or whatever he is that, should have come to all humanity. Why did he come to all humanity? Okay? That's how they differentiate. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem. He communicated with every single Jew at Sinai. This is not hearsay. We had it firsthand. But according to what the Ramchal is saying, it's much more than that. Much more than that. Let's say every Jew would see somebody walking on water, somebody flying. Doesn't mean anything. Therefore what? It could be an optical illusion. You could be hallucinating. It had to be a level of communication through prophecy that we're able to fathom that God is infinite. It's not only what we saw. That we were there and we witnessed. What did we witness? You can witness things you don't even know what you're seeing. Well, he flew like a bird. Therefore what? That means he's God. He was able to lift a mountain, which humanly is impossible. That means he's God. Doesn't mean anything. It's only because through prophecy, HaKadosh Baruch Hu communicated to every Jew that he's infinite, he's absolute, and every aspect of his being was that he's betachlis hashleimus. Without that communication, that is who he was, it's irrelevant that we saw. We heard him speak. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. We heard the words, but we had no depth of grasp of understanding what those words meant. Doesn't mean anything. So it's much more. I mean, it's a good differentiation, but it's much more profound. The difference is much more profound than what we're saying. Give you an example. It was known the Ben Ish Chai, Zeichet Tzaddik Lebrocha. He was the leading sage in Baghdad, Iraqi Jewry. He was the head of Iraqi Jewry. He was a Kabbalist. Every Shabbos he would lecture in a shul, and there would be 10,000 people coming to his lecture. Every Shabbos, men, women, and children. Now, without a sound system, could 10,000 people hear you? But it was known that every person that was present was able to hear the voice clearly of the Ben Ish Chai when he spoke. How's it possible? Nobody knows. But this was a known fact. He has supernatural powers. He is, you could draw whatever you want from there. But of course, it's baseless. Was he a Kodesh? Yes, he was a Kodesh. Was he a Makubal? He was a Makubal. Did he know the Torah in its entirety? Yes. But what about all the other stuff that people tack on? It's all nonsense. It's all, these are fables. That's all it is. It means nothing. Unless HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells you what it is, it's nothing. That is the Mesorah. That Hashem is Sholem, Betachlis Hashlemus. In every aspect of completion, absoluteness, that's what he communicated to us. That was the Sinai. Therefore, it's Pentishkach. So to understand, believing who God is, that has to be communicated. Remember, many years ago, this was in the 60s, there was a certain shul in Baltimore, and there was a Jew comes, he says that he has the talus of the Vilna Gaon. And there's a special skula, special omen that if you kiss it, it's a holy talus. So people were running to this synagogue, shul, to kiss the talus. Some Shiva heard about it. He said it's a bunch of nonsense. He says, firstly, he doesn't believe it's the Vilna Gaon's talus. And even it was, what does he come up that if you kiss the talus, somehow you're going to be blessed by kissing a talus? Lahavdil, you kiss a Torah, it's an entity of Kedusha, holiness. Well, this nonsense. I'm not sure if he charged the fee before he let you kiss it. Whatever it was. But he dismissed it immediately. It's not, but people get caught up with this. Holy, this, everybody's looking for somehow the quick fix. Quick fix of bracha. Chofetz Chaim writes, he says, everybody's looking for segula. And they've spent thousands and thousands of dollars of various ways to change their situation. And most times it doesn't work. He says there's no greater segula for bracha than studying the Torah itself and doing the mitzvahs. That's the greatest segula. And it's cost-free. And it's proven, and it is its essence. Even if it doesn't manifest itself immediately in this world, olam haba, guaranteed. So where's everybody running? You know? Whatever it costs, I'm willing to pay. No payments. Just sit and study. Do the mitzvah. Put on tefillin. Don't be distracted. Don't talk during davening. Don't talk during Kaddish and Kedusha. Right? Eat what you should eat, not what you shouldn't eat. Don't wear shatnez. Don't transport on Shabbos. Or many other things. You'll have bracha. It's like a person. He wants to be healthy, and he abuses his health. Simultaneously. Is it possible? A person, he wants bracha, and he behaves in a way where it's the basis for klola, for a curse. Person, chas v'sholem, he doesn't observe laws of family purity. Torah says a person doesn't observe the laws of family purity. It's the liability is koreh, spiritual excision. And many other things the person. He doesn't observe Shabbos properly, which is even more serious. It carries the death penalty, although we don't have the Sanhedrin to implement it. So this is klola at the most extreme level. But why don't I have bracha? What do you mean? You take cyanide and you expect to run 1,000 miles an hour after taking cyanide. Literally, you're destroying your neshama. You're creating every blockage. The Gemara says in Brachos, why doesn't God answer us? Because there's a mechitza shabarzel. There's an iron wall separating us from Hashem. That's why our tefillah is not heard. And what is the mechitza shabarzel? That's Avon Hussein Shol Yisrael. Those are the sins. So what's the question? So where's the bracha? I'm such a good Jew. If you understand what it means to be a good Jew and what the basis is, then you understand a little bit. To be continued.